Before Bugsy Siegal and Frank Costello, there was a man with a reputation so bad that every child in America knew his name. Probably someone who made the term gangster known to the world. But he didn't just fall from the sky one day and began committing crimes. That's right, it's not like you're walking down the street one day and you go, hey, you know what? I feel like robbing a bank. No, you are a result of your childhood. So what must have gone wrong in this case? How did a kid from Brooklyn become one of the most feared gangsters in American history? This is the story of Al Capone, the notorious crime boss who ruled Chicago during the 20s. Known as Scarface, Capone's life was an amalgamation of crime, power, and sometimes intrigue. So who was Al Capone, and how was he able to shake up America's history forever? This is the story of Al Capone. Let's travel back in time to understand. On January 17, 1899, in Brooklyn, New York, a child was born to Gabriel and Teresa Capone. They were two Italian immigrants who had settled in the United States. Their sweet baby boy was named Alphonse Gabriel Capone, who would later infamously be known as none other than Al Capone as a child. Capone was known for his sharp wit and his ability to charm those around him. But like every origin story, his early years were also accompanied by hardship. His father worked as a barber and his mother as a seamstress, and the family obviously faced financial struggles, which were not uncommon for immigrants at the time. The Capones lived in a tough area, and young Al was exposed to the rough and tumble life of New York City's streets. Just like any other kid in the locality, Capone also did his education at the Public School 7, where he was a fairly average student. Ironically, his early education did not indicate the future criminal mastermind he would become. But again, it would have been a lie to say that there were no instances where one could have guessed about the future that lay ahead. The turning point was when he was expelled from school at the age of 14 for hitting a teacher. After his expulsion, Capone worked a variety of jobs, including in a candy store, a brothel, and as a truck driver. You can imagine what a child must go through in these circumstances. A gangster was in the making. This early life in New York laid the foundation for his later criminal career. The jobs exposed him to the rougher society a kid won't be aware of. He was never like other kids, and soon he will be like no other man. He was building connections and not the regular ones. And slowly yet steadily, he was introduced to the world of crime. And this meant that Capone became involved with the local gangs. One of the most influential groups he joined was the 5 Points Gang, led by the notorious gangster Johnny Torrio. The 5 Points Gang, as its name suggests, operated in the 5 Points district of Manhattan, a hotspot for organized crime. Which brings us to the obvious question: what was next for Capone? Well, Capone quickly rose through the ranks of the 5 Points Gang due to his ambition, charisma, and ruthless nature. His work as an enforcer and his involvement in various criminal activities, including extortion and robbery, earned him a reputation as a formidable figure in the New York underworld. His association with Torrio was particularly significant. Torrio recognized Capone's potential and became a mentor to him, introducing him to more sophisticated criminal operations and strategies. But power isn't without its headaches, is it? Capone's rise within the 5 Points Gang was obviously not without its challenges. He was involved in a number of violent conflicts with rival gangs and had several run-ins with the law. Despite this, he managed to dodge these dangers effectively. But how did he pull it off? Well, Capone was sharp and had the street smarts to maneuver around trouble. Plus, his connections helped him maintain his position and grow his influence even further. During this time, he has multiple associates other than Torrio. Some notable names were Frank Nitti and Sam Giancana. Frank the Enforcer. Nitti was a key figure in the Chicago outfit and one of Capone's most trusted associates. He was involved in various aspects of the organization, including enforcement and operations. Nitti played a significant role in the day-to-day operations of Capone's criminal activities and was known for his loyalty. But just like any other crime story, Capone also had to face the consequences of his crime. He was arrested for a while, and during his imprisonment, Nitti became one of the main leaders of the outfit and continued to manage the organization's affairs. Sam Giancana was another prominent gangster associated with the Chicago outfit. While he was not as closely tied to Capone as Torrio or Nitti, Giancana was a part of the broader criminal network that Capone was part of. This would later be a key part of the puzzle of our story. Because you see, Giancana's involvement with Capone's organization was more about business dealings and criminal operations. He later became a significant figure in organized crime, particularly during the 1950s. But it was not only these two. Capone had a network of legal and business associates who helped him manage and expand his criminal empire. These individuals were crucial in maintaining the operations of his bootlegging, gambling, and other illicit activities. These associates were often more focused on business dealings rather than personal friendships. They helped Capone navigate the complexities of organized crime and maintain his operations amidst increasing legal pressures. It's surprising how he was able to do it all. Al Capone slowly but steadily was now climbing the ladder of power faster than ever. He was building connections with influential figures, including Mayor William Hale Thompson and members of the Chicago Police Department. These relationships were based on mutual benefits and corruption rather than personal friendship. And what happened next was obvious. He began evading law enforcement and expanded his criminal empire significantly. That's right, one hand over the criminal empire and other on the legal bodies. He had both political and legal protection, and there was nothing for him to be afraid of. By the late 1910s, Torrio decided to relocate to Chicago, and Capone followed. This was a new chapter in his criminal career. This move would prove crucial. You will later understand why. Moving to Chicago meant that now Capone was in the heart of Prohibition-era Chicago, where he would rise to prominence as one of the most powerful gangsters in American history. And by 1917, Torrio introduced Capone to gangster Frankie Yale, who was much more powerful than him at that point of time. Torrio hired him as a bartender and bouncer at the Harvard Inn in Coney Island. It was during this time that Capone earned the nickname Scarface. Why Scarface? Well, one night after making an inappropriate comment to a woman at the bar, he was attacked, leading to the scars that gave him his infamous name. Around this time, Al Capone meets May Coughlin, the love of his life. May Coughlin was born on April 11, 1897, in Brooklyn, New York. She came from a working-class Irish-American family and met Al Capone in their youth. In one, the couple married when May was 21 years old. The year was 1918 to be precise. The couple soon had a son, Albert Francis Capone, the very same year. Both of them had a strong and supportive relationship throughout their marriage. Despite Capone's criminal activities, May proved to be a stabilizing force in his life. She was known for her discretion and loyalty, often staying out of the public eye and managing the family's private affairs. Albert's early life was relatively sheltered from the public eye, as his parents worked to shield him from his father's world. Albert Francis Capone was educated in private schools, and his upbringing was aimed at providing him with a normal life, despite his father's criminal notoriety. After Capone's conviction and imprisonment, Albert's life became more challenging due to the stigma associated with his father. But it almost seemed that he was leaving behind the crime world. Capone's family life remained important to him, and he provided for his wife and child, ensuring they lived comfortably. But mafia ran in his blood, and a new opportunity for power had knocked his door. It was the year 1925. Torrio decided to retire, following an assassination attempt on his life. Capone's rise accelerated dramatically. Torrio handed over control of his empire to Capone, marking the beginning of Capone's reign. With Torrio's departure, Capone transformed the operation into what would be known as the Chicago Outfit. Under Capone's leadership, the organization expanded its reach and influence, establishing dominance over Chicago's criminal underworld. Since he was in charge, Capone soon started forming new strategies. One of his key strategies for consolidating power was the ruthless elimination of his rivals, just like plucking weeds in the garden. This approach was starkly illustrated in the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre of 1929. But what exactly happened on February 14, 1929? To understand that, you need to know who Bug Moran was. Born Adelard Cunin in 1893, this guy was a major player in Chicago's crime scene during the Prohibition era. He started his journey in Minnesota but quickly made a name for himself in the city, leading the notorious North Side Gang, taking on none other than Al Capone himself. Moran was no stranger to danger, known for his cunning and ruthless tactics in the cutthroat bootlegging business. The tension between them reached its peak with the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre. The massacre was carried out by 4 men using Thompson submachine guns. Two of the shooters were dressed as uniformed policemen, which helped them gain access to the garage without arousing suspicion. This was a strategic move by Capone to eliminate a rival gang that was competing with his organization for control of the lucrative illegal alcohol trade. The Northside Gang was a significant threat to Capone's dominance in Chicago, and the massacre was intended to eliminate this competition. 7 members of the Northside Gang, led by George "Bugs" Moran, were executed in a garage at 2122 North Clark Street in Chicago. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre shocked the nation and garnered extensive media coverage. The brutality of the killings, the use of police uniforms to gain entry, and the high-profile nature of the victims made it a defining moment in Capone's criminal career. It underscored his willingness to use extreme violence to maintain his power and control over the city's criminal underworld. This was recorded as the most terrible crime committed by an American gangster. But it did make you wonder, how many murders has Al Capone committed? Determining the exact number of murders Al Capone personally committed is challenging due to the nature of his criminal empire and the lack of precise records. However, Capone was indirectly involved in numerous murders and violent acts through his leadership of the Chicago outfit. Although this was the only incident that made headlines, we would never know about the murders that didn't surface. He also continued other illegal activities without drawing attention. Yes, Capone's illegal alcohol operations during Prohibition were highly profitable and contributed significantly to his wealth and power. To be specific, it was like gold during the 1920s dry spell. His network was extensive, and he maintained control through a combination of bribery, violence, and corruption. He controlled a vast network that extended far beyond the city limits, operating a web of hidden speakeasies and smuggling routes with an efficiency that made him a household name in the world of crime. But Capone didn't stop at just bootlegging. His empire was a crime conglomerate with fingers dipped in gambling, where he ran everything from small-time betting joints to lavish casinos. His operation didn't shy away from racketeering either. Capone's crew ran protection rackets and loan sharking schemes, ensuring that no business in his territory could operate without paying their due. Maintaining control of such a sprawling empire required more than just savvy business acumen. It demanded a heavy hand. Capone employed a team of enforcers who wielded violence like a weapon to keep rivals at bay and discipline within the ranks. This fearsome approach ensured that his criminal kingdom remained unchallenged for years. And that's not it. Capone was known to have personally been involved in a few violent incidents, but specific numbers of murders directly committed by him are not well documented. His reputation for brutality was more a result of his control over a vast network of criminal activities and the violent enforcement tactics used by his organization. It was also under Capone's leadership, the Chicago outfit was involved in numerous violent acts and assassinations to maintain control over its territory and eliminate rivals. Capone's organization used violence as a tool for both internal discipline and external intimidation. If we look into the historical accounts and investigations, they suggest that Capone's organization was responsible for many deaths, including the murder of rival gang members and the enforcement of his criminal empire. While Capone himself may not have committed all these murders personally, his leadership and orders were a significant factor in the violence carried out by his gang. His had the ability to manipulate the complex world of organized crime, allowed him to amass considerable wealth power and any other support he needed. Some say it was because of this skill that, despite his criminal activities, Capone was also known for his charitable acts and attempts to maintain a positive public image, which contrasted sharply with his violent criminal undertakings. Strange enough, Capone had reached to the height of his power. Al Capone lived an extravagant life and was a well-known figure. But as he gained notoriety, law enforcement and federal authorities started to close in on him. Despite his attempts to stay under the radar, it was tax evasion, rather than his violent crimes, that finally brought him down. His criminal reign began to tremor in the late 1920s, largely due to the fallout from his own audacious actions and the relentless pursuit of law enforcement. The turning point came with the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, as we told earlier. That incident had drawn a lot of attention, the media and law enforcement, who were now more determined than ever to bring Capone to justice. Despite his criminal brilliance, Capone underestimated the power of the federal government. The authorities, led by the newly formed Prohibition Bureau and the determined J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI, launched an extensive investigation into Capone's finances. They shifted their focus from his violent crimes to something more tangible: tax evasion. This strategy was a clever move, as Capone had been less meticulous about his financial dealings. It was the beginning of his end. In 1931, Capone was charged with 22 counts of tax evasion. The trial that followed was highly publicized and dramatic. Capone, once invincible in his criminal empire, found himself on the defensive as evidence mounted against him. The prosecution used Capone's own admissions of income and unpaid taxes to build a strong case. On October 17, 1931, he was convicted on 5 counts and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. But in all those time, May was instrumental in supporting Capone during his legal troubles and imprisonment. She visited him regularly and worked to maintain a positive public image for her husband. During Capone's incarceration, it was May who continued to manage their finances and maintain their home, preserving their lifestyle as much as possible despite the challenges. Capone's prison sentence marked the beginning of the end of his reign. He spent his first years at the infamous Atlanta Penitentiary and later at Alcatraz, where his health began to deteriorate. By the time he was released in 1939, his criminal empire had disintegrated, and his health was severely compromised by untreated syphilis. Capone's son, Albert Francis. Capone's life continued to be affected by his family's criminal legacy. In the later years, he tried to distance himself from his father's criminal past and lived a relatively low-profile life. He engaged in various business ventures and worked to distance himself from the shadow of his father's criminal activities. Albert Francis Capone passed away on December 29, 2004, at the age of 86. Throughout his life, he largely avoided the public eye and worked to establish his own identity, separate from his father's infamous reputation. He worked his whole life for that. May and Albert Francis Capone's lives were no doubt significantly impacted by Al Capone's criminal career, but they also worked to manage the challenges that came with his notoriety. May's role as a supportive wife and Albert's attempts to lead a private life exemplify the personal side of a man whose public life was marked by crime and infamy. Al Capone's downfall was a dramatic fall from grace for a man who had once seemed untouchable. The combination of his own brutal actions, the relentless pursuit of federal authorities, and his inability to evade the long arm of the law ultimately led to the collapse of his criminal empire and the end of his reign as one of America's most feared gangsters. It makes us think how poverty and lack of guidance, and we mean good guidance, can turn poor kids in. Who knows, maybe he was too deep in the puddle before he realized it was the wrong path. Sometimes there is no coming back. There was always this profound mystery, and Al Capone's life and criminal career have become legendary, capturing imaginations through countless books, films, and TV shows. He stands out as the quintessential gangster of the Prohibition era, forever cementing his status in American pop culture. Iconic portrayals in movies like The Untouchables and gripping documentaries have chronicled his meteoric rise and dramatic fall, ensuring his infamy endures. Historians and researchers studied deeply about Capone's life, examining the profound impact of his criminal empire on American society. His story serves as a compelling case study in organized crime, law enforcement, and the cultural shifts brought on by Prohibition. Then there's Alcatraz Island, the infamous prison where Capone spent part of his sentence. This maximum security fortress has become a symbol of tough incarceration. After closing its doors in 1963, it transformed into a popular tourist destination, drawing visitors eager to explore Capone's connections to the site and the broader narrative of American criminal justice. Capone's legacy continues to fascinate, with his former Chicago headquarters, Miami residence, and even his gravesite attracting curious tourists and crime enthusiasts alike. Each location tells a piece of the story that still resonates, inviting exploration into the life of one of America's most notorious figures. And that's a wrap-up of our journey through the life of Al Capone. It's clear that his legacy is as complex as the man himself. We hope our video captivated somewhat of your imagination about Scarface. What part of Capone's story fascinated you the most? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the story of Scarface, you wouldn't want to miss checking out the tale of the Phantom Killer.